Radio 1290 WNBF, live and local on your Thursday morning. I'm Bob Joseph. We welcome to the program Kip Zeiter of the International Motor Racing Research Center in Watkins, Glen. Good morning, Kip.
Hi, Bob. How you doing?
I'm doing well. Thanks for being with us on the program.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Thanks for the invitation. The sun is shining in Watkins, Glen. I hope it is in the Triple Cities as well.
Yeah, we're getting a couple of really nice preview days for spring. We're enjoying, I think it'll rise to 60 today, maybe into the mid-60s tomorrow. So that's a sign of good things to come.
We're very hopeful of that. Yes, sir. Definitely.
So tell us a bit about the center, the International Motor Racing Research Center, a little bit of the history, how it got started, and the mission of the center in Watkins, Glen.
I'm happy to do that. The International Motor Racing Research Center is now entering its 21st year, and it was established as an archival library research center dedicated to collecting, preserving, and sharing the history of motorsports. Now, people make the assumption that because we're located in Watkins, Glen, that all we are is a sports car facility, and that is definitely not the case. We are tremendously honored to have the history of racing in Watkins, Glen that we have. Possibly your listeners are not aware that the first sports car race the first post-World War II sports car race in America took place in Watkins, Glen on a chilly October afternoon in 1948. They raced through the streets from 1948 to 1952 on a 6.6-mile course, all on public roads. That ended in 52 when an accident, unfortunately, killed a young boy in the crowd, and the state stepped in to mandate no racing through town. They then moved the circuit up the hill close to where the present-day track is now located and raced on a series of town roads for 3 years until the track was built in 1956. So this place came about, the idea for this place came about, it actually started in 1996. The village and officials at Watkins Glen International were looking for a way to celebrate the 50th anniversary of racing, which would take place in 1998. The public library had a small but very nice collection of motorsports books, and the idea was put forth to add an addition to the public library, move those books from there to here, and the phrase "from a small acorn a big tree grows," that's how the place began. The building was dedicated by three-time world champion oh my gosh, this is embarrassing.
That's okay. That's okay.
Jackie Stewart, holy cow, in 1999, and we've been here ever since. From that very small collection of books, we now have a volume of almost 5,000 books in our library. We have hundreds of DVDs and VHS tapes. We have programs from tracks literally around the world. We have trophies, artwork, thousands of photos and slides. We have lots of stuff. And it is, again, it's not simply Watkins Glen. It's NASCAR, it's Formula One, it's Indy, it's local racing. It runs the gamut. And the cool thing about this place is that we do these things called center conversations periodically. And last month we did one on MG racing at Watkins Glen and the whole history of that. And coming up here on the 23rd of this month, we're doing a program called Open Wheel Madness, and that's going to focus on the board track era of racing in America, which went from 1910 to about 1930. And then I have another fellow that's going to be talking about midget and sprint car racing in the 1920s and 30s. This was during the era of the Barney Oldfields and the Louis and Gaston Chevrolet and Ralph De Palma and Jimmy Murphy, all the great American drivers that became legendary, all drove on these board tracks, all drove on these dusty fairgrounds ovals, and we're going to recreate that. I have two fellows that write for Area Auto Racing News that are going to talk about the board tracks and the racing. We have period cars on the floor on display. We have two sprint cars and a midget, so people can come in and get up close and personal with cars from that era. And it's when I tell people it's a research library archival institution, that in and of itself sounds somewhat dry and somewhat boring. But when you actually come here and see what we have, it's a lot more exciting than that, and it's kind of geared both for the true gearhead who geeks out at this stuff in every aspect, and as well as the just casual fan. So it's a pretty cool place.
And it's also open year-round. It's not open just during, say, the nicer weather season. So if people happen to be in Watkins Glen, they can still visit even in the middle of winter.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, in the winter, we're not open on weekends. We run simply a Monday through Friday 9 to 5 schedule. Our Saturdays, well, we do these programs once a month in the winter, so on Saturday. But our Saturday hours will start here in April, and we're open Saturdays 10 to 4. We're not open on Sundays because we have a very small staff, and we just don't have the people to be here. But
well, let's
yeah,
talk a bit.
Friday, 9 to 5.
Let's talk a bit about the staff, though. You've got several people who do assist in with the history and the archives, and assisting people with questions, and just whether they're indeed real enthusiasts or people who are just coming to learn more, and perhaps in the early stages of learning about motor racing. You've got people on staff who can help answer questions and also just prepare additional programs going forward.
Yeah, very definitely. We have a honest-to-God archivist on the staff. We actually hired her. She had a 8-year career working for the Baseball Hall of Fame in Cooperstown, and switched gears kind of literally and metaphorically to come work here. She's done a wonderful job of transitioning from squeeze plays and bunts and sacrifice flies to pit stops and lap times and all of that stuff. She's done a great job. Everybody on the staff here, to one degree or another, is a motorsports enthusiast. I'm kind of the meet and greet guy, so when somebody walks through the door, I introduce myself, ask where they're from. Again, we normally have a car on display, so we can talk about that. Yeah, it's really geared, when I say it's geared for the hardcore people and the casual fan, it truly is. We have people that will come here from literally all over the world because they're researching writing a book on a particular car or a driver or a series. We have people that come here because they simply want to know who won a race at a particular track on a particular date. People just come to look around. We have about a 25-minute movie that is a very great retrospective of the first 25 years of racing here. We put that on, and the typical visit, we get lots and lots of tourists here in the summer. It's about an hour. They'll come in and they'll look at the car, they'll watch the movie, we'll chat, and they go out hopefully with a bit more of an appreciation for, number one, what racing means to Watkins Glen, and number two, what this place means to preserving the history of racing.
There's also a driver's walk of fame now in Watkins Glen.
Oh, yeah, there has been for years and years and years. The prerequisite is, of course, that you had to actually drive on the track, but that's one of the charming features of this town, is you can walk up and down Franklin Street and look at the great names of racing past and present, and there's murals on some of the walls painted by a local artist. The signposts on the street are little race cars. I mean, certainly the park was here for centuries, way before any of us were here. But with the first post-World War II sports car race in America happening right here in 1948, Watkins Glen just has this aura for the race fan. And it's not simply for the race fans in America. We have people come here from, again, around the world who know Watkins Glen because they're race fans. And it's a very cool town, and the little place that I work at here is a pretty cool part of that.
I love Watkins Glen, and I don't get there as often as I'd like, but every time I'm able to spend some time in the community. I just find it a charming place, and I certainly am now putting on my list the next time I'm in Watkins Glen to make sure to visit the center, because I just, frankly, I was not really that aware of it, and certainly I think I had heard of it, but not really paid much attention until it was called to my attention by one of our listeners who said it would be a wise move to have you on the program and let some of our listeners know about this opportunity that really is so close to Binghamton. It's not that long a drive now that it's going to be spring and then summer to spend a nice day going to Watkins Glen and visiting the research center and certainly a lot of the other wonderful features and attractions in and around Watkins Glen.
Well, there's some great restaurants in town, and there's a struggling little industry called the wine industry that you can't go more than about half a mile up the road on either side of Seneca Lake, that you're not going to bump into one delicious winery or another. So, yeah, I mean, it's truly, for the person in the Triple Cities area, it takes you probably an hour and a half to get here at best. And you can make a day of it. You can do a little wine tasting, have a great lunch, stop in hopefully and see us and chat and see what we've got on the floor. And yeah, it's just it's a little getaway day. And again, if I could just make note specifically of the March 23rd talk, we call it Open Wheel Madness, not because we're disparaging the drivers that drove in that era, but actually we're kind of hyping them up because these guys were a totally different breed. It was a tremendously dangerous era to drive in. These board tracks, which I've always been fascinated in, were just unbelievable. They ranged in length from half a mile to 2 miles long, all made of 2x4s. They ranged all over the country. They weren't in one particular area or another. And again, all the great drivers of that era drove on the board tracks, and a lot of the drivers, the other fellow that's going to talk about the midget and sprint car racing, is going to not solely focus on the big names that drove during that time, but some of the lesser known people that, you know, were every bit as brave and every bit as, well, I wasn't going to say foolhardy, but every bit as brave as the big names. It was a fascinating era in American racing, and because upstate New York racing will be starting here within the month, probably. I don't think anything's racing up here on the 23rd of March, which is a Saturday. This is kind of our prelude to the fan to come over and get their season started off by learning about all the guys that set the standards for and how racing began and how it evolved and into the sport that it is today. This is kind of a primer in how it used to be, and get everybody geared up for the racing season that'll be starting up here very shortly. So.
And people will be interested in knowing that this is open to the public and the admission is free.
Admission is free. We kind of ask if you want to throw a couple dollars into the pot, because we do have some refreshments that we serve after the program is over. And if you want to help contribute to that, that's great, but that's not mandatory. Admission is free. The program actually begins at 1 o'clock in the afternoon. We do the formal program literally right across our parking lot in the Watkins Glen Elementary School auditorium, very nice plush seating, all the tricked out AV stuff we need. Program usually lasts a couple hours, and then everybody comes back. We've got some refreshments. You can talk a little bit more in depth with the speakers and hang out and look at the cool cars that we've got on the floor. And the center will open at 9, and people start funneling in anytime they want in the morning, but the actual program begins at 1, and it's going to be real fun. That's our program for March 23rd. If I could just put a plug in, on April 6th, we're having our 6th annual model car show. So all the big cars will be gone. This place will be filled with tables filled with little miniature die-cast cars and scratch-built cars and slot cars, and we're very excited this year that we're having an appearance by the Rochester Lego Users Group, who have designed a really cool little kit car that they'll be selling for, I think it's $6 a piece, kind of a cool souvenir of the event. They're bringing a Pinewood Derby-style track that kids can race their cars down. They're also building and bringing 1/8 scale race cars, obviously made out of Legos, that they'll have on display. We've been trying to work out a deal with Lego for the last couple of years, and it just didn't work from a scheduling standpoint, so we're really excited to have them here in April. And that's really going to be that's a bring your kids to event. And again, that's free and open to the public, and people that have these model car collections are extremely proud of them and extremely willing to talk at length about, what got them started, why they collect this one particular type of car or series or something like that. So that's a real fun event as well. So again, road trip on the 23rd of March, road trip on the 6th of April.
And to prepare for your road trip to Watkins Glen, you can get a lot of information on the center's website. There's a great deal about the history of the International Motor Racing Research Center, the history and the people who work to make it possible, as well as all the information about the events you've mentioned and still other events that are scheduled later in the year. And the website is racingarchives.org. And I find the website fascinating. There are links to some intriguing videos. I think anybody who has a few minutes in the next couple of days would do well to check out the website.
Yeah, thanks, Bob. Yeah, we always try and I think they took some footage of us bringing a couple of the cars in yesterday, and for some reason people always like watching that. I'm not quite sure why, but...
Well, you know what I think it is, for all sorts of whether facilities or projects, I think people like to have sort of a glimpse of something that's behind the scenes, even if it's just a couple of minutes to see how did this get assembled. I think there's always, whether you're talking about a research center or, say, the making of a TV show or a movie or maybe even a radio talk show, I think people are fascinated to sometimes see a short video and see what you normally don't get a chance to see. How do people actually put something together, and as opposed to just how we enjoy the finished product, to get a glimpse into how all the pieces came together.
Yeah, I guess I agree with you on that. People are always asking me, well, how do you get the cars in here? It's like, well, we just open the door and we push them in. It's not really rocket science. And admittedly, some of the cars that we have had on display here are wider than our doors allow. So there is a certain disassembly required, pull a wheel type of thing to get the car in here and then kind of put it back together again when it's on the floor. In this particular case with the two Sprinters and the midget car, that was real easy. We just pushed them through. And the cool thing about these cars, they are, two of them anyway, the midget and one of the sprint cars, are literally barn finds. Everybody talks about these barn find cars all the time. And both of these are, and they were raced all over the place, but they were raced locally. Both the one midget and the one sprint car were raced at Shangri-La Speedway. I'm sure your listeners remember Shangri-La Speedway.
Absolutely.
I spent a lot of Saturday nights there. So they have a local history as well as a somewhat more extended history in Pennsylvania and Ohio. And so I'm thrilled. Those cars actually come to us from Alan Tadich, who lives down in the Endicott area, and I was made aware of him several weeks ago, and he is extremely hospitable in bringing the cars over here and letting us have them on the floor, and so they're totally awesome. You got to come and check out our cars.
Well, I look forward to my first visit, and again, people want to check out the website. I would encourage people to look at it, find out more about what we've been discussing. Racingarchives.org. Our guest has been Kip Zeiter of the International Motor Racing Research Center in Watkins Glen. Pleasure to chat with you. Thank you.
Appreciate the time, Bob. Thanks very much, and I'll look forward to hopefully having you pay us a visit here in the not-too-distant future.
I would look forward to meeting you. Thank you again for giving us an overview of the center.
Thanks very much.
It's 10:57. This is News Radio 1290, WNBF and WNBF.com.